On December the 16th, 1960, at approximately 10:33 a.m., airplane parts began raining down across Staten Island. The massive tail of a Boeing 747 landed in Park Slope, Brooklyn, and then, moments later, another tail fell upon Miller Field. 10 residential buildings were annihilated. An 11-year-old boy who had fallen out of the sky landed in a snowbank and survived. For 90 seconds, the airplane parts turned into shrapnel and massacred the city in what the press perceived as, quote, a distinct new kind of catastrophe. In other words, on that fateful Friday morning, 2 enormous passenger planes collided over New York City. And today, we recall their story. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. United Airlines Flight 826 was a DC-811 from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport to JFK, with 77 passengers and 7 crew members on board. Captain Robert Sawyer, who was 46 at the time and highly experienced as a pilot, led the flight. Transworld Airlines Star of Sicily Flight 266 was a Super Constellation aircraft carrying 39 out of Dayton, Ohio, with a stop in Columbus before heading over to LaGuardia Airport in Queens. The crew on this plane was less experienced, and beyond that, they were probably traveling on a cursed aircraft, since the airline's sister ship, the Star of Sen, was destroyed in an unrelated midair collision, also with a United flight over the Grand Canyon back in 1956. Anyhow, around 10:21 a.m. EST, both aircraft were nearing their destination. This is when United 826 advised the Aeronautical Radio Network that one of its VOR receivers was inoperative. Although this message was passed to the airline's maintenance team, air traffic control was not informed that the aircraft only had one operational receiver. Then, at 10:25 a.m., air traffic control issued a revision to their clearance, ordering 826 to shorten its route to a holding pattern near Lawrence Harbor, New Jersey. The pilot failed to comply and continued at an excessive speed towards the destination where visibility was very, very poor, making navigation difficult. In other words, United Flight 826 was 12 miles off course and headed towards disaster. On the other hand, the TWA Flight followed its assigned flight path and instructions from air traffic control. It was exactly where it was supposed to be, but it was also experiencing poor visibility from light rain and fog. And this was the moment that masses of people lost their life. At 10:33 a.m., one of the DC-8's starboard engines struck the Constellation just ahead of its wing, instantly tearing off a portion of the fuselage. This sent the Constellation into a dive, scattering debris far and wide below. Witnesses recall flames and smoke in the sky as metal, people, and suitcases began to rain down. The lion's share of that airplane ended up in Miller's Field. However, sections were spread as far away as New York Harbor, with victims found both on the ground and in trees. Flight 286 conjured some of the most dramatic imagery from this event, as after losing part of its wing, it managed to stay airborne for another 90 seconds. And in that relatively short time, it dumped wreckage and set fires to brownstone apartment buildings, a church, a funeral home, and a laundromat. And then, what remained of that aircraft's tail came down into the Park Slope section of Brooklyn, at approximately 7th and Sterling Place, and then blocks away from there, other sections of that same plane ended up in a large open field at Prospect Park. Witnesses thought that a missile had fallen, and at least one occupant of an affected apartment said that his family survived because they were in the only room not destroyed at the time of impact. When the dust settled, a long trench covered most of Sterling Place's middle. This accident was sudden and completely unexpected, as no radio contact had been made with traffic controllers from either plane. However, LaGuardia had noticed an incoming, fast-moving object, which later turned out to be Flight 826 before the collision. As the buildings burned, the first responders were horrified by what they had found. 154 people had left this world forever. Though there was a sole survivor from the flight, an 11-year-old boy who had fallen from the sky into a snowbank. Born on January 9th, 1949, Stephen Baltz came from a loving Midwestern family. With sisters and brothers, his father was said to have wholeheartedly believed in the Boy Scout oath, while his mother took her responsibilities as a homemaker with honor. The family was highly active and adventurous, spending summers at camp, guys-only outings to Wrigley Field, and road trips out to the East Coast, including a visit to the nation's capital. Their home in Willamette was picture perfect, including 4 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, and a large porch. Simply put, they were living the American dream. And their young son Stephen was said to be a lovely little guy. In fact, on some counts, he was the center of the family. I feel this letter, sent from Stephen to his parents from summer camp only a few months before the accident, really demonstrates the boy's innocence. So, to help celebrate who he was, before getting to the more heartbreaking aspect of this story, let's take a moment to read it. Dear Mom and Dad, I forgot to mail my first letter, but I'm mailing it now. The address of the camp is Camp Makajawan, BSA, Pearson, Wisconsin. I forgot to tell you that I am in Sioux Village. I'm having a nice time, except for the mosquitoes. I have around 50 bites. Please write me sometimes. I have bought 1 pair of shoes for me up here. They are very nice. I have caught 1 largemouth bass, but he got away when I took him back. I caught 7 frogs, 2 toads, and 1 snake so far. Love, Steve. Stephen was traveling out to Yonkers alone to spend Christmas with his family, and the fact that he was traveling unaccompanied was well-keeping with his family's outgoing approach to life. And it should be noted that his mother and sister were already out east waiting for him. Somehow, it was his destiny to be on that flight, as he was initially scheduled to fly out on the 14th, but his parents rescheduled to the 16th. One source recounts that this came up as a point of contention in the family, with Stephen's sister explaining, quote, I once asked Mom whether she and Dad had ever fought about the tragedy. Her mom responded, quote, just once. Your dad blew up and said to me if I had not insisted on Steve meeting my parents in New York. And I answered, quote, if only you hadn't changed the flight. That was it. We never fought about it again. And that's the thing about history. It doesn't make sense. It can't always be explained. Tragically, for our story, that 11-year-old boy boarded a doomed airplane. Stephen fell over 5,000 feet and initially survived. Brooklyn residents immediately rushed to his aid, bringing him to the nearby Methodist hospital for urgent care. When news broke that Stephen was found in that snowbank, New York City rallied together for his survival. The mainstream media focused on his recovery, and Catholic masses were given in his honor. This young American boy was in the hearts and minds of the nation. As a father myself, I don't even want to consider how his parents felt. Stephen succumbed to his injuries the following day, and it was reported that he murmured, I want my mommy, as his deeply touching last words. Stephen would be laid to rest back home in the Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie, Illinois. In addition to the other victims of the horrific event, his story outright broke the hearts of the country. In New York, a small memorial was made in honor of Stephen and his flight mates, the victims of this disaster. The boy's pocket change, which was all the money in the world to him, is pressed into the left-hand side of the plaque. And down below that is a final sentiment, reading, Our tribute to a brave little boy. Years later, Stephen's childhood autobiography was discovered, offering us a glimpse into the man he aspired to become. Reading, quote, When I get out of college, I'm going to try to be one of these things. 1. Work for the government by being an FBI man. 2. Be a lawyer for some company. And 3. Be an engineer for the Canadian Continental Railway. I'm going to retire at or around the age of my late 60s or early 70s. As we wrap up here, I've got a bit of a confession. I want to be open with you guys. This story is so disturbing that I considered canceling the episode. The thing is, in so many little ways, it hits very close to home. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs with a mother from the East Coast, so we flew back and forth. And I have family members buried in the same cemetery as Stephen, and so the headstones I go to visit look almost exactly the same as Stephen's. I grew up going to Cubs games and took the Boy Scout oath. So just what am I driving at here? Our own stories are not as unique as we'd like to think. I imagine many aspects of this story hit close to home for you as well. Stephen or any of the other 154 people on those planes could have very well been our cousins, our brothers, our friends, which is why, in my opinion, it's so incredibly painful to recount a stranger's tragedy, an ultimate tragedy, as we had to do in the case of this video. I propose we let Stephen and everyone else lost on those 2 airplanes serve as a reminder of how close, just how similar the rest of us really are. I mean, at a bare minimum, the rest of us, well, we're still here. Let's keep it that way. I thank you all for watching. Until next time, this is Ryan Socash, signing off.